Terrapins, welcome back to another episode of Turtle Wandering. I am on my way to the Mammoth March, so if you can see behind me, it's still kind of dark out. This is an event that I signed up for a virtual version last year, had a really good time with it, did like 65 miles inside of a week, and this year they have an in-person event, but the original one I signed up for was supposed to be in August, and that was in Philadelphia, and then it got postponed to September, and then it got canceled. So they offered to move registrations to their event in New Jersey, and that is where I am on my way to now. So driving to meet up with my friend Jess, her husband, and another friend of hers, and we're off to do some marching. Alright, we safely got to the event. We're loading up our gear, trying to decide what we need. Jess over here is always perpetually cold, so she's trying to figure out like what 15 layers she needs, and then we're gonna get this party started. Video. So at this point, we're on our way to the start. Need to check in, and oh, we found the porta potties. There are some. You're safe. So we're good to go. And so it begins. Well, some of this trail is actual legit hiking, which is cool. It's not just rail trail, but this park is known to be rooty and rocky. I've mountain biked it, but it's my first time ever hiking it, so it's kind of cool looking at it from a different angle and perspective.
Shake it like you mean it, baby. Come on and dance, baby. Come on. Shake it like you mean it, baby. Come on and dance.
Alright, the lungs are now open. Whew. Have a good time storming the castle. There they are, getting their photographic moment in. Alright, so a little bit past the 3-mile mark, and after there was a really section, super rocky, actually, like with some scrambling involved, at mile 1.5. Now this section is pretty flat, which is great, because I can definitely pick up a little bit of time here and keep the pace going, but so far about 3¼ miles in and feeling pretty good. So I'm on a part of the course now where everybody's pretty stretched out, so I'm out here by myself. Not super length, I can see people behind me, but you don't have a crowd, which is very peaceful. Certainly that's also where your mental fortitude kind of comes into play, and where your mental state is, because that's when you start processing through things, and oftentimes, I know for me, that's where the therapy kind of happens, because my brain starts to process what's going on and ideally takes the jumble that's going on in my head and starts making it a little bit more linear, which for me is helpful, because once it's linear, then I can start kind of checking things off and working through any thoughts or feelings that I have going on. But this is also the part where it can also go south. Now, mind you, it's pretty early in the walk for that, so I'm not really worried about that. It'll be more, mile 15 or so. Because the reality is, I normally walk 5 or 6 miles a day anyway, and on weekends, get a longer one in. That's a few hours. So really, the test is going to be after mile 10, so about the halfway point. It's going to be that second half where I'm going to have to dig a little deeper. And just to help keep my mind a little occupied, I did download some podcasts last night, hoping that maybe if my brain is listening to some stuff that's a little bit more enjoyable, as things start to niggle and hurt, I won't focus on that, and instead my mind will be able to go somewhere else. Alright, just over the halfway mark, so about 10 miles in. Definitely feeling it at this point. The feet, the heels in particular, are definitely getting a little bit tender, and my hip has tightened up, but don't feel awful, but the pace has definitely slowed down a little bit, but at least I know I'm halfway through it. We'll keep going. Alright, it's gotten dark. The wind's picked up pretty good, and I think a storm's about to roll in, so this should get interesting for sure. So luckily for me, we were hiking through a Boy Scout camp area, so I was able to grab a little bit of shelter for a couple minutes, long enough to protect my backpack and put on my rain jacket and pull out the umbrella before things got really ugly. But it is coming down hard at this point. So hoping to just get to the next checkpoint, which should be in less than a mile, and then see what it looks like from there. Alright, just hit up rest stop number 3 at what they're calling mile 16, although by my count I'm over 17 and a quarter miles. But that means 4 miles to go, so looks pretty smooth walking, so that'll be helpful. So hopefully I can knock this out maybe in the next, hour and a half or so, since I'm moving a lot slower, and get to the finish. Alright, as you can see behind me, it's getting to be dark. It's about 6:30, so I've been out here close to 9.5 hours, and got about a mile to go yet. So I'll probably break out my lights in a minute or so, unless the path ends up being really, really clear, just so I can kind of finish this up. Alright, made it to the finish, 22 miles total. I am beyond beat, so just kind of waiting for Jess and Christina to come in, and just going to try to relax, stretch a little bit, and my ride report or race report or hike report, whatever at this point, I will give that tomorrow, because at this point I'm just glad to be done. So night y'all, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
3 weeks later.
Alright, so it's been a few weeks since the Mammoth March. Definitely wanted to take a little bit of time to think about it, process it, kind of gather my thoughts before I gave you all kind of my post-event wrap-up. The event was hard. There's no other way around it. It was just super hard, super challenging. Um, can't say I was prepared for all that it was, which was frustrating because I thought, I'd had my kind of training on point. But I think really what it came down to was I wasn't ready for the level of the terrain that was on the course that day. As I mentioned the earlier part of the video, it was super rocky, and so like every time I looked up, it was off camber stuff, and so certainly I probably twisted my left ankle a good 10 to 15 times, and the right one several times as well. So if anything, it also let me know that I may eventually want to get some boots for if I'm going on rockier terrain, so definitely lesson learned there. It also let me know that I need to do a better job of researching an event before I do it, because all my research was really based off of the original event that I'd signed up for, which was going to be much more of kind of a smooth path. So really the challenge was going to be about the distance, and in this case it was the distance and the technical kind of put together. And then to add insult to injury, and I know I alluded to this earlier too, the course markings were way off. And when I was talking with some other folks online that also did the event, it wasn't just me, so it wasn't like my GPS was off. I mean, the course was off. So for what was supposed to be a 20-mile event, it was more like 22 and a quarter or so, which doesn't necessarily sound like a lot, but if you're already kind of beat up and tired, 2 miles is a lot. And because it kept adding, I didn't have a good idea in my head either exactly how much further I had to go. And then on top of that, the course markings towards the end started to thin out a little bit, and that was around the time that it also was getting darker. And my headlamp wasn't as bright as it probably needed to be, and then the rain made that a little bit worse too, because the rain basically reflects the light back off, so you don't really get like a long beam the way you normally would. So I was having a hard time seeing. It was super dark because you're in the woods, so it's even darker than dark because you're not getting any moonlight or anything. And then there weren't a lot of course markings, and one of the feedbacks I would think would be this idea of what they call confirmation marks, which are every once in a while that if you make a turn, it's kind of confirmation that you've definitely made the right turn, and there weren't any of those, because towards the end there were also a couple road crossings, and I missed 2 turns, which again was frustrating. And thankfully, because I at least downloaded on All Trails, my All Trails told me that I was off course, but then it took me a little bit to find out what was on course, and because there were so few people still on the course, it wasn't like I could look and easily find other people. Eventually I did end up finding another person, and we kind of walked in together, because by the time we got to the finish, I guess because of the way the storm hit, they had started breaking down parts of the finish line and everything they had set up, because some of it was starting to fly and break and everything, which makes sense. But it was then also pitch black, so you had no idea if you'd actually gotten to the finish. You were just kind of like walking in this field, and eventually then you kind of heard this voice that was like, hey, are you still part of the event? At which point then it was like, yeah. And they gave us our certificates and our medals and everything else. But again, this was feedback that I shared with them, was that if you have to tear down the course early, or the end of the course early, that's one thing, but at least keep a lot of lights going so that people know that there's an end and they can see it. Plus it just makes everything safer. I mean, in the end, would I ever do a Mammoth March again? Certainly not the New Jersey route. If they're gonna have it at the same park, I would never do that again. I might maybe consider if they ever bring it back to Pennypack, which was where the original event was supposed to be. But, I'm not sure. I mean, I recognize that it's a new event, so there's growing pains and there's a lot of things to learn. But I don't know if that's the direction I want to go in.
you know, again, it just ended up, instead of it being fun, it just ended up being very stressful. And that's not what it's about for me. That's not what I do. That's not why I go outside. I do that to, you know, help my mental well-being, and instead I just kind of felt very beat up by it. And so while it's not necessarily the most upbeat ending in the world, I mean, I think it's realistic. You know, at least I can say I did it. I challenged myself. I know I can hike 22 miles in a day. Not that I necessarily want to do that unless it's a through hike again in the future, but you know, it is what it is, and got through it. So, you know, that's Mammoth March. You know, if you made it this far, I appreciate you watching all the way to the end. Please leave a comment, like the episode if you were into it, and you know, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, Terrapins.